You know that feeling when you finally decide you need a dedicated camera for your live stream, you spot a cheap PTZ on a deal site, click buy, and a week later you're wrestling with laggy autofocus and a sensor that can't see past a dim room. I've been there, and I've also heard a lot of fellow creators tell the same story. You save a few bucks, only to end up with footage you can't salvage. That's why today we are looking at whether the PTZOptics Move SE 3010 80p Full HD PTZ auto-tracking camera feels like a smarter buy, or just another cheap but cheerful disappointment. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. When I first heard about the Move SE, the biggest thing that caught my ear was the promise of true auto-tracking on a 30 optical zoom lens, plus the ability to switch between HDMI, SDI, USB and IP outputs without a separate splitter. Those are the exact pain points I've seen in live stream setups: juggling multiple cables, losing the camera's focus on a moving presenter, and scrambling for a high zoom shot when you're filming a stage demo. The question is, does the hardware actually deliver on those promises, or is it another glossy spec sheet that looks great on paper? Let's talk about who this camera is built for. If you're a hobbyist who mostly streams from a single room, a decent webcam, or a consumer-grade PTZ can cover you. But if you're a working creator, think a small production company, a university lecture hall, or a church that wants to run multi-camera streams without a crew, the Move SE starts to make sense. The inclusion of NDI-HX means you can feed the video straight into OBS, Wirecast, or vMix over a standard Ethernet network, shaving off the need for capture cards. That alone saves you both money and setup time, especially if you already have a robust network in place. Now, on the flip side, if you're just looking for a plug-and-play solution for a one-person podcast, the Move SE may be overkill. Its $999 price tag isn't cheap, and the learning curve around its tracking and menu system can be a little steep for someone who wants a camera that works out of the box. I've spoken with a few freelancers who tried a lower-priced PTZ and were happy with its basic pan-tilt functions, only to discover later that they lacked the auto-tracking they needed for interactive Q&A sessions. In that scenario, they might be better off with a mid-range PTZ that offers decent zoom, but no auto-track, saving a few $100s and still meeting their needs. One of the most practical strengths of the Move SE is its autofocus confidence. The camera uses a CMOS sensor that, according to PTZOptics, handles low-light scenarios well. In my test setting up the camera in a dimly lit studio with a single clamp light, I found the focus locked onto a presenter within a second and stayed sharp as they moved about the stage. The auto-tracking algorithm, which can follow a subject based on color and movement, held up during a fast-paced product demo where I walked across the set while gesturing heavily. That would normally throw off a cheap PTZ, which often chases the subject but never quite catches it, resulting in a jittery frame. Low-light performance is another real-world factor that matters. Many budget PTZs rely on older CCD sensors that become noisy when the ambient light drops below a certain threshold, forcing you to crank up the gain and end up with a grainy image. The Move SE's CMOS sensor seems to manage a usable signal down to about 10 lux without noticeable grain, making it suitable for webinars held after sunset, or for venues that don't have dedicated stage lighting. That said, it isn't a full-blown cinema camera. Under pitch-dark conditions you'll still see some noise, so you'll want at least a modest key light or softbox if you're streaming from a dark room. Stabilization is a phrase that often shows up in PTZ marketing, but in practice it's more about how quickly the motor can settle after a pan or tilt movement. The Move SE uses a fairly robust stepper motor that feels smooth, and after a quick pan the image stabilizes in roughly half a second. In a live production where you're switching between speakers, this delay is hardly noticeable. However, if you're trying to capture rapid action like a fast-moving tutorial where a presenter darts from one side of the board to the other, you might notice a tiny lag before the lens refocuses. For most talks house-style content, that lag won't be a deal-breaker. Menu friction is something I pay close attention to because I've wasted hours on overly complex interfaces. The Move SE's on-screen menu is organized into tabs for zoom, focus, tracking, and output, each with clear icons. Changing the output from HDMI to NDI-HX takes just a couple of clicks, and the camera remembers the last setting after a power cycle, which is a small but appreciated detail for anyone who runs multiple streams in a day. The only gripe is that the auto-tracking sensitivity is a single.